Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Hello and welcome everybody to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. I have with me today maybe one day, I don't know, not yet, but David Wolfe, who is a fellow sugar addiction, food addiction recovery expert. Technically, he also has a background as a registered dietitian, and he was certified in that in 2013. A few years later, he went back to get certified through InFact as a food addiction counselor, and is now doing that full time. And of course, like many of us working in this field and space, he is also an addict in recovery who has 5 solid abstinent years under his belt. And today we were talking a little bit off camera about secondary addictions and how when we put down one addiction, there's another one that can kind of creep in and take over and become clear and obvious. So I'm really excited to have that conversation with David today. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is super.
So just for people who aren't familiar with you, why don't we start back at the beginning and tell us a little bit about your own struggle to unhook from refined carbohydrates, how you did it, what it was like when you were in the food, and how you became unhooked and what your life is like now.
Yeah, so I would come home from school as a little kid and I would just run downstairs, like I'm from a cold climate with a parka, gloves, hat on, just like go into the pantry, grab 5 bags of something, eat them to oblivion, hide the wrappers. Didn't really know what I was doing. And actually my mom thought the babysitter was stealing food. So I was always a relatively thin kid. Another big part of my story is I was on amphetamines for 25 years, taken as prescribed for ADHD. So I think that really suppressed my appetite and at least to some degree kept my addiction somewhat in check because there was always a substance going on. When I look back, I don't believe that I was addicted to amphetamines, but definitely became dependent on them. And that became evident through my, withdrawal process. So, I don't know, food's just a part of everything I've ever done, from when I plan trips. I planned a trip to Nashville like 5 years ago, and it was like this restaurant, this place, this fried chicken joint, So it's just always been so centric to my life. My great grandmother was responsible for cooking for her village in Eastern Europe. So it's just like, we just kind of feel like it's in our blood. And so there's no greater thrill to me than feeding other people, like pleasing people with food. So I think that sort of ties into my addiction too. And also just like not fitting in, being alone in a crowded room, feeling like an outsider, being uncomfortable with myself, being comfortable around others, being comfortable being alone, just all that stuff. So, and my mom's an addict in long-term recovery too now. And so I remember it was like as a kid when she was active versus when she was kind of working her program, so to speak. And it was definitely a much different life. The household was much different. I remember knowing what would happen if my mom ate certain things. Like as a kid, be like, Dad, why is she doing that? And my dad would be like, just stay out of it, leave her alone, get out of the way, And he learned that from experience too. So it's just kind of been addiction throughout my life, whether it's been mine or others. And that's really influenced and impacted sort of the trajectory of my life, to doing what I'm doing now. So.
Yeah. So what was it like when your mom, let's say she was abstinent for a while and the house was calmer, I'm assuming, and what was it like when she relapsed?
Yeah, it was, there was this veggie pizza. She always got this veggie pizza from this place called Eddie's Pub, which is just like a regular run-of-the-mill pub where I grew up. And I just associated, I knew that she would change. And she did. Like, my mom is like the kind of person you want to call like your cell phone carrier's customer service line when there's a problem. Like, she's like patient. She'll put her foot down, but like peacefully. She's very adamant about getting what she needs. And she does it with such grace, but like when she's in a drug, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, she's late. She's She's grumpy. She's surrounded with bags and boxes. She wants nothing to do with chores or keeping the house tidy or whatever. So, and she's very tidy, like she's really tidy. So it's just like everything that matters when she's in a drug doesn't matter. So I remember that as a kid and that shift and like begging my dad, like, don't let her get the pizza.
That's
And
incredible.
him being like, Dave, there's nothing we can do.
Oh my God, that's actually it's really sad to think of, how many millions of children are being emotionally abandoned, really, because mothers or parents, but probably large numbers, potentially the vast majority of mothers are all hooked into these processed foods that pull us into personalities that are complete, sounds almost night and day.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, you can't really conceptualize that when you're like 10, but
Mhm.
we definitely knew that the substance changed mom.
Mhm.
Like that was clear. Absolutely. For
Yes.
me and for my sister. And now we're both addicts too. Yeah.
Right, right, right,
So
right, right. And why do you think you felt different and alone in the room?
I don't know. I just did.
Okay.
I just feel like it's just the way I was made, you know?
Yeah.
Just felt uncomfortable in my own skin. Um, I don't know. Yeah, like so many people look for whys, and I feel like it's like one of those soft, cushy things that's nice to know, but it doesn't really translate to a transformation in the same way like a how does. Like,
Yes.
so I really focus on like the action steps that I need to take on a daily basis so that I can get the results that I want and not the reasons why I do them.
Yes.
Because in the end of the day, the reasons why I take the actions that I take is because they work. Um, it's like the Dalai Lama says, he's like, if you can scientifically prove that meditation like isn't beneficial, I'll stop. So I need to have that mindset where like I pick up practices for my recovery. Like I have this journal I picked up. I thought it was a really cool idea. It gives you like it's like one day, but it represents 5 years. So you put an entry and then you can kind of do this look back. And I was like, oh wow, this sounds really meaningful. Let me like add this to my evening practice before I retire. And I was like, okay, this sounds great. In practice, I started doing it and I didn't notice any benefit from it. So I stopped doing it. I
Yes.
don't do it anymore. Right. And so I think, my recovery gives me the opportunity to like transition away from things that don't add meaning. Because if something's not adding meaning to my life, what is it doing in my life? I mean, my time is my most sacred thing. That's like, I can't make more time. I can make more money. I can make new relationships. I can't make more time. So I try to, use it to imbue meaning.
Yes. 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 So, in terms of, I'm sure there's many people that would be very interested in hearing how you tapered off after 25 years. A stimulant and ADD medication. What was it like, and when did you do it? How long did it take?
Yeah. Okay. So I did in fact, like you mentioned, and then I met Bitten Johnson through in fact. So I just emailed her and I asked her to be my mentor. She's more like my auntie now, but like, we do work together. We do a lot of things together. And I work with her. I'm on her staff and so we're really tight, but she helped me really. And I went to my doctor and I said, I want to get off these meds. He's like, oh, that's okay. You'll be tired, but you won't go through any like withdrawal. People don't withdraw from amphetamines. Um, by the way, that's completely erroneous and false. You definitely do. So I was on about a 20 milligram dose. I went down to a 15. Then I went down to a 10, like probably like 3 months. And then I went taper down again, and then 3 more months. So I'm about 6 months in, and I'm like, I have a baby coming. Like my first daughter was born really on the day when I stopped taking meds. I don't know the exact date, but it's right around when she was born. So I just say her birthday is like my anniversary of being off these meds. So anyway, so I'm on 10 milligrams. It's coming up and just like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna not refill the prescription. Interestingly enough, the reason why I came off of meds is because my doctor forced me to get a drug test, which actually the insurance charged me for. to fill the script, and it cost me almost $500. So that was actually the impetus to get me off the drugs. It was like, I never want to be put in a situation where my doctor's forcing me to get pee tested again, because I really didn't have a problem with these meds. But anyway, it got me off. So then it took me probably like 10 more months till I started to feel normal again after I stopped taking it. So, and I don't think I realized how bad I was, but like in hindsight, I remember about 10 months off of meds, and my wife came up to me and she's like, Dave, you were like really depressed. And I was like, yeah, you're really right. Like I had no idea. I didn't know up from bottom. Like I was not managing well at all. I mean, like I kept my job and this and that, but it was a real struggle. When I came off the meds, it was like irritability, nausea, incredible muscle, like limb, like definitely like forearm, wrist, and like calf and leg discomfort, pain, cramps. And that lasted a while. I mean, 4 or 5 months. So it was gnarly.
Yeah.
So
And that's incredible to ride that all out. Like you must have seriously decided that's enough of this. I'm not peeing in a cup again.
yeah, so it was enough. And it was just like, I spent my whole life on these drugs, and they controlled me. They controlled my appetite, you know, they controlled what I focused on, what I didn't focus on, so I think that, and it was like, like I'm a guy, like a challenge, so I think that kind of played into it too. Like everyone's telling me I can't do this, I'm going to do it. I remember I picked up the bass guitar, and the reason I picked up my bass guitar is because my sister told me, you've never learned an instrument. Like, and that's why I learned how to play bass guitar. So just like, whatever, I'm up for it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I can always go back on the drugs. And I've from time to time I've thought about it. Like, I wonder if this would be easier on meds, but I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that.
Nice. Incredible story. And do you feel like your brain has healed itself? Like, are you better than you were when you were on the drugs?
No.
No.
Like, I mean, I've done a lot of healing, and I'm definitely a lot more patient than I was when I came off and things like that. But it's still a struggle. I mean, to do the reality is that my brain is I learned how to learn on drugs, right? So like I learned how to study. I learned how to do, like repeated things, build habits on an amphetamine. So when you take that away, I don't have that anymore. So I can really relate to these people that are like being diagnosed with these illnesses, or I don't even think ADHD is an illness. I just think of like, I have a different kind of brain and I need to be doing different kinds of things. But these older adults that are being diagnosed with ADHD or these mental illnesses that they didn't know about until they were much older, and they had to like get through. Like my dad is ADHD now, and like he had to just do high school and college by himself. He just had to figure it out, and like he probably felt like he was climbing uphill with roller skates on the whole time, like I didn't have to do that because I guess I had meds,
Mm-hmm.
and they worked, and they worked even up until the point where I stopped taking them. They were still working. It's not like they stopped working. It's just that I just didn't want them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see what it would be like to be me without amphetamines all the time. And yeah, I get tired sometimes, and it's not like regular tired. It's like if you've been through withdrawal tired, it's like that. I mean, like I'll just like on a 2 p.m. on a Saturday, I'll just be like, oh my God. And what do? You take a nap if you can,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, but it's worth it to me to not, I'm not a slave to a substance anymore.
Right. And not just one. So you've weaned yourself off of amphetamines after 25 years. You weaned yourself off of sugar and flour. after probably your whole life.
Those I just cut. Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
from the womb.
Yeah.
You've cut
And
yourself off from
coffee.
alcohol, coffee,
Yeah.
sourdough bread, like the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
and you're saying it's worth it. What makes it worth it? You've just cut off all these pleasures and these
Well, that's
things
so
that,
funny, like I was, someone else asked me this the other day. It was like, what makes you happy if you don't have this, and that? I'm like, well, everything else makes me happy. Like I told them, like my daughter Willow, she's 3. She wakes up in the morning. What does she want? She wants blue cheese. Like little things like that, just like they make me smile. They make me like giggles, making my infant giggle. Like that makes me happy. Like life. So, and I really don't do well with pleasure anyway. It's like it never lasts long enough. It's too quick. And then it leaves me with this void. So, if you and Dr. Lemke talks about the pain and pleasure seesaw, as pleasure goes up with your dopamine, pain, that then the pleasure goes down, the pain comes back up. And if you're anything like me, you don't like pain. So, how am I going to get this lever back down? When in reality, the thing that actually tips it back down is a little more pain. So, people like doing something really challenging or hard, or like sticking your head in some ice water or something, like kind of to shock your system back into balance. Because as an addict, I mean, our dopamine balance is so off. So we have to really kind of like jar it back. It's like there's this rusty point on the seesaw where it gets glitched and stuck, and you really gotta force it back to homeostasis, because our homeostasis system is kind of whacked.
totally. Do you feel, I hope I'm not flogging a dead horse here. Do you feel like, I think that almost every addict that I've ever met identifies with feeling lonely in a room, even with people that love you and they're your friends. I think it's a really common trait amongst us that we feel different, like we don't fully belong, that we're not enough. There's something, that holds us back from feeling connected. And that does change on the other side of our addiction. And I'm curious to know if you found that as well.
Well, yeah, like I like silence today. It's kind of nice. It's peaceful. So I think, like I think I chased noise most of my life. Like I would be that kid that would just like be obnoxious just to like fill that silence. Do you know what I mean? And there was nothing ever there but consequences, but I did it anyway. So yeah, but today I don't do that. I just mostly my life is pretty peaceful. I mean, the chaos that's in it, I tend to create myself, but and it's almost as if in recovery, when you're doing that. So it's not like, oh, how'd that happen? It's like, you're like, you're co-signing the process. So,
Right. Right.
it's like, it's not like I don't know what my triggers are. You know what I mean? I don't know what situations aren't really healthy or helpful for Dave.
Mhm.
So I think it's different, but yeah, I think most addicts, I can identify with that. Like I heard this one time, someone said, hey Dave, if you're home alone, you're outnumbered. Now, like that makes perfect sense to an addict, and everyone else is just kind of sitting there scratching their head.
Totally.
Right. so
Yes.
like, Dave, what do you mean? What does that even mean? I was
And
like,
every person listening to this podcast that's an addict is nodding their head. The light bulb goes
right.
on. Totally.
Right. I mean, addicts know how to talk to addicts.
Yep.
Just yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and I
Yep.
think that's a big part of the healing
It
for
really
both
is.
sides.
Yes, yes. When those voices and the critic and all those, that mumbo jumbo in our head gets quiet and silent and peaceful, and they're satisfied because we're getting our needs met and we're able to observe them and ignore them or meet them and heal them. And it's such a journey. So let's go there. Let's talk about, let's just talk about those voices in your head, in our heads, that make it so painful sometimes to just be and sit with ourselves, be in the silence. So what have you done to help those settle down?
I mean, mainly I hang out with other addicts. First of all, I think that really helps. There's a lot of co-resonance. There's a lot of connection that happens in my life on a regular basis. Like I see people that don't have many like meaningful relationships or meaningful conversations, and like I have at least like one really meaningful conversation every day, with somebody. Sometimes like today, I don't know, it's 2:30. I've already had like three, like really like meeting someone where they're at, or someone meeting me where I'm at and really listening to me, or, so that's already happened to me 3 times today, so I think that's a big piece of it. I don't know how bad the banter really was for me. I mean, as soon as I sort of like when I learned about the physical allergy, um, when I learned that like this substance creates the need for more of the substance, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, let me apply that knowledge. It wasn't like, let me fight this tooth and nail. It was like, okay, so here's some new information. It's being presented to me in such a way that I think I could just apply that. And so, like there's sayings that say like the first drink gets you drunk. And I'm like, okay, I get what they're saying. Like if I don't have the first bite, I don't need a second one through my 100th bite. Like I don't have to do that. I don't need my second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth drink or line or whatever it is for you. It doesn't matter. I can just not take it, and apply the tools that I need to apply in order to not take it. And then so I don't think the banter it wasn't like, I don't know. It's certainly not as bad as I've heard from others. Like we at Sugar X, we talk about the red dog, right? And so the red dog is your disease, and it tells you all sorts of crazy things. Like I'll be driving down the highway, and my red dog will tell me, like, "Hey, Dave, why don't you drive in the middle of 2 lanes? Just it'll be fun." And like that's what my disease does. And you can just like see it for what it is and be like, "No, that's crazy. I'm not gonna do that today." So.
Right. And in terms of secondary addictions, so what was your experience of that, and what advice do you give your clients around how to watch for it and what to do with that issue?
So I don't really like look at it like it's a secondary addiction. I look at it as like it's my primary disease. It's just that I've hit a point in my life where I haven't, no matter what, against my primary drug. So like, I just don't eat sugar and flour. Like, there's nothing you can do that it's going to convince me that that's a good idea. Like, it's a matter of fact. It's just, that's it. So my disease, like, it's like water trying to get into a ship. It's going to find the hole. So it's going to play around with whatever it has to play around with to try to get me to take the dopamine bus for a ride. So, I mean, it's been all sorts of different things. I think most recently was work, but it's been, in the course of my life, it's manifested in all sorts of things. Alcohol, pot, relationships. I'm a compulsive helper, like, which is my term for codependency, because I really don't like that term. I don't think people like recognize it by the word, but they don't really know what it means. But people understand what it means to like compulsively try to help, And so I think all that stuff, but work, like constantly checking emails, like checking sales, like checking calendar bookings, like, sneaking in like first thing in the morning, like in between tasks, like, oh, dinner simmering. Let me go, do something useless for the next 15 minutes just so I could feel different than I was feeling. And I think what happens is we get uncomfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's part of the recovery process, is like being able to identify I'm uncomfortable and just doing nothing about it. Just being uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable, like vulnerability. Like, it's terrifying, but it's worth it. So how do I get comfortable being uncomfortable? And right, the thing that stands in my way of doing that are outlets, are other outlets. So one of the things we do is we have a tool, we call it the, I think it's just called AID. It stands for Addiction Interaction Disorder, which is sort of our way of saying one disease, many outlets, and it enables us to look at all the other things and be like, check off the boxes. Like, have you ever acted out through this? Shopping, porn, relationships, could be anything. Trying to helping others, recovery even. I mean, we can get obsessed with our recovery. So, and then it gives people an opportunity. I mean, if it's framed in such a way, people like people's guard is down. So they're just like going to objectively answer it like a yes or no question. Well, have you ever done this? No. Are you sure? And then I think it gives people the opportunity to say like, oh yeah. Because all we need people to do is say, you might be right. There's just like this little tiny space where the light starts to get in. It's like that Leonard Cohen song, like, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. Like, just need a little crack. So a little bit of insight can come flooding into people's rational mind, and they can be like, you know what? Yeah, I do have a problem with shopping. It's not just really around all the time, but, when I'm feeling low, yeah, I like to buy stuff. Okay. That was huge. You just admitted something really big about yourself. Now what? What are you going to do about it?
Totally. And what if I'll play devil's advocate? So let's say I'm one of those people that have just had a little crack of insight. And for a brief moment, I see clearly that that's one of my outlets, that my core addict, my addiction, and all these different possible outlets, all these different levers that I can pull to shift how, to take me out of discomfort, distract me. And I'm seeing, oh, yep, sometimes shopping is one of those. And you say to me, okay, now what? What are you going to do about that? And I said to you, I don't know. What would you say to me back?
Well, I would say, have you had enough? I think we have to use pain as a tool. Right? That sounds awful, doesn't it? But what gives people the impetus to change? That, like, especially in the world of recovery, like, the pain of staying the same has to be greater than the pain of perceived change, or the perceived pain of change. And then when that happens, there's nothing you can do to stop a person from changing. It's just like they just coast. It almost sometimes it seems like they're coasting uphill, which is incredible. But I think that's what happens when you put yourself in the position that life could be better if I did this, this, and this, as opposed to this, this, and this. And that's what you really want. You get it. You seek it.
Totally. What about with something? So many of these addictions that you're talking about they're not as simple as put the plug in the jug, like shopping. We still have to shop. We still might need clothes or whatever, or food we still need to eat, or work we still need to work. So how do you make a distinction? How do you help people decide whether or not shopping or working or something that they have to still engage in, usually on a daily basis, is crossed over from doing work versus work that's compulsive, or shopping that's compulsive, or something that's problematic behavior or addictive behavior?
So I'll tell you about something that's worked for me in the past, and when I apply it, it works really well. So there, I look at it. My life has two switches. Okay, I have a family switch. Like, I have my queen, who's my wife, and I have my kingdom, which is my home. Like, that's all family, right? And then I have work. And I cannot have two switches engaged at the same time, because whenever I do, bad things happen. Feelings are hurt. I'm not as attentive to my children. Things are late. Just gets messy. I'm reactive, right? So I have my like work switch engaged and my family switch, right? There's only one on. You see these three switches behind me. There's only one that is actually a live switch, and it's the last one, the furthest one from me. The other two aren't active switches. It's just the way the electricity works in my house. So literally, while I was started, I had a work switch and a home switch, and I would flip the switch, and so that would help me like, okay, which switch is on? All right, you physically did something to sort of mentally prepare yourself for like what's in front of you. So that enables me when I'm working to focus on my work, and when I'm with my family to focus on my family. That being said, there have been periods where I've fallen away from that practice, not the flipping of the switch, but like the mental switch. And things get messy. Like whenever I have like a bad night, or I'm like emotionally off, or like uncomfortable, or hurting people's feelings, or any of that, it's always because I mess with my switches. I make excuses. I'm like doing the family, and then I run over here to check something, and then my kid's getting into like the dishwasher or whatever it is. That's like a minor example, but bad things can happen. So when I'm distracted, so I think that's one of the tools that I really use, and I really like to make it clear on my calendar which switch is on. Now I work from home, and I'm also a pretty active dad. So like I'm with the kids till 9, and from 9 to 12 I'm working. Then from 12 to 2 I'm with my daughter. I feed her lunch and we play, and I get her ready for bed. And then from 2 to 4:30 my work switch is engaged again, and then I turn off my work switch and I'm fixing dinner. And then depending on the day, I might turn on my switch again at night, but usually not. So that's just a tool that I use. It just makes it really clear. And now work, like you said, is one of those things where you can't turn off, right? Shopping is another thing, but one of the things you can do is you can figure out and decipher between your wants and your needs. And I will be honest with you, it literally, before I was in recovery, it took me 3 years in therapy to figure out the difference. Whereas people will say to me, I really need this. And I'm like, no, you really want that. And they're like, no, I really need it. And I'm like, no, that's not a need. It's not an imminent threat if it's not done. Like, I think a lot of people look at to-do lists like their needs. And generally speaking, most things on your to-do list aren't needs. They're desires, things that you'd like to get done. But it's not like if you don't do it, you're going to die or you're going to lose your house. Like paying your mortgage is like a need. I need to pay my mortgage. But like getting the laundry done, no, it's not a need. I think so. So I think we can look at things like we call them at SugarX, we call them real threats versus imagined threats. I think we feel threatened by things that aren't getting done, but they're not really threats. They don't really threaten our sobriety. They don't really threaten our ability to function. They don't really threaten our family, And so I think it gives us the opportunity to say, like, do I really need this or do I not? And so I think that applies to some of the other behavioral addictions, right? Like shopping, like work, those things that seem ambiguous.
Right. And I suppose another criteria would be, does it feel impulsive and compulsive? Like, oh, like you really need this, right? That's often, and I'll catch myself with my own to-do list. Like, I'll get really basic. Like, I really got to do this. Whoa. That feels compulsive. What's going on here? Because I can feel the dopamine's rolling. There's some sense that if I do this and if I get this done, something really good's going to happen. And if I step back and look at what's going on, what is it that you think that you so urgently need that's going to save your life or fix the moment? And it's just me chasing again. It's chasing the same damn tail of the dog, right? I'm back in the loop.
So what happens when you check that thing off your list? As a human being, you're going to go to the next thing on your list.
Right.
You're going to feel like nothing was accomplished. Have you ever like gone through a work day that was like crazy and be like, what did I actually get done today? And, and it's just because that's how life is. Life is, it's like I have small children. Again, like once I figure out the schedule and we have like consistency, it changes. It just does. Like nap times are figured out. Wait 5 minutes, and like just like life happens. It's funny you said impulsively. So we read this in group yesterday. Don't push the button. It's all about impulsiveness, right? And it's a cute, it's a cute, story about a character that can't help himself from pushing the button, and I think, like that sounds like an addict. Like even like with the consequences, he like gets polka dots and he like transfigures into like all these different creatures and and he just keeps pressing the button. So it just shows you how our brain really works. And I think that applies to the to-do list. I think it becomes, and what does it become? It just becomes a thing we do. And it's almost as if I could deal with the consequences, or I could just do that thing again. And then I won't have to worry about them for a little longer. And that's what addiction becomes.
Yes, yes. It's constantly trying to outchase anxiety that you can never outchase. In fact, it intensifies.
Right. Yeah. And that's really funny because I think a lot of people are like, I smoke because I have anxiety. I'm like, no. You have anxiety because you smoke. Right. And so I think, and people don't realize that it's not the cigarette that's, it's like 5 minutes of relief and then like hours of chaos until you smoke again or whatever your substance is. But I think it's very common for people to kind of pinpoint cigarettes with anxiety.
Oh, and sugar too, I think. Yeah, eating. I think I certainly ate sugar when I felt anxious for sure. So, do you have any other final words that you'd like to share with people who are on the sugar addiction spectrum and they're looking at, not just getting abstinent, because we know, you and I both know abstinence is a tool. It's the beginning of the journey of recovery.
Right.
It's what comes
Right.
after that's so interesting and rich, right? And it allows us to see our addiction as having multiple outlets. Because I was under the delusion for years that if I could just I tried so damn hard to just get sugar flour free that I just thought that when I got there, oh, everything would be absolutely perfect. And it was quite a revelation to realize, oh, honey, all you've done is triage. You've just stopped the bleeding. Now we need to do the recovery work, right? And so now the healing can happen, the deeper looking at all these impulsivities, compulsions, and what you're really avoiding, right? Those moments of discomfort. So is there anything more you'd like to say about the journey of recovery?
Yeah, I think I would just leave people with a really quick tool that I think is like monumental. It's actually something I've taken from human resources, believe it or not. And it's basically write down the things that you're doing for your recovery, right? And you rate them on the amount of effort that it takes you to do them on a scale from 1 to 10. So like 1 is like very little effort, 10 is like very high effort, right? And then you go ahead and you rate the same list on impact, right? So like the impact that it has your recovery. Like I talked about my journal, that was low effort, low impact. So it wasn't a lot of work, but it didn't give me a lot of perks. And so go ahead and then you plot them on a quadrant graph. So like the things that have the most impact and the low effort, those are like your golden stars. And then, you have the things that are high effort and low impact, like they take a lot of energy, they drain you, but they don't give you a kickback. Those things you just pitch. So it enables you to see, okay, what parts of the recovery that you're working are actually working and working for you. Because you're going to notice the things that have the biggest impact for you often are the things that require the least amount of effort. And people spend all this time and energy doing arduous tasks that they don't like doing. And they really don't serve them. And they actually take up a lot of their time, which again is a valuable resource. So I think that's a really cool objective way of looking at recovery. So because it's just as important to add the good stuff as it is to remove the bad stuff. In fact, it's probably more important to remove the bad stuff. So I think that gives people the opportunity to kind of address it, see it, and say like, oh, look, I didn't realize this wasn't really working out for me.
That's so brilliant. That's totally cool.
It's totally a human resource tool. Like they use it to get the most out of their resources.
Right.
But it applies beautifully to recovery.
It really does. And I'm just thinking for me on the top of my head, I was making a note, like I think one of the things that is the most effort for me, but I get like 10 out of 10 in terms of impact, is getting out into nature, even in the dead of winter for, my 45-minute to an hour walk in the trees. All the bundling up and the effort, but it's consistently one of the most impactful things that I do for my recovery. But it's good to remind myself it is the number one most impactful. The difference I feel in my mind and my body when I'm out in the trees may not be true for everybody, but it's really true for me. And to just remind myself that it's always worth the effort. What are
It's
some of
awesome.
what are some of your, let's say if I had to pick your top 3 to 5 things that you do for your recovery, the highest
Yeah,
impact.
definitely like primary connecting, just connecting with others in whatever way I can. I mean, just like fully engaging with relationships like on the daily. That's probably one. I think, and that's like outside of me attending groups or running groups. I would say 2 is attending and running groups and really, being a part of. And then 3 is probably like scheduled time for me to just be me in, like whether that's like plugging on a sound canceling headset and going nuts, or you know, just like being quiet if I need to be quiet, but like that's just time for me to like be by myself. That's like soul nurturing stuff for me. It makes me able to handle life's ups and downs on a balance. When I don't do that, it's very like topsy-turvy. So I would say those are my 3 things.
Incredible. Wonderful. Any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, guys, don't give up. I mean, regardless of where you are in the progression of your disease, I mean, you can arrest it and even reverse it. Hopelessness is a lie. No one is ever beyond hope. So
Thank you.
that's it.
Thank you so much, Dave. What a pleasure to connect with you today. And thanks for your story and your wisdom.
My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.